Welcome. This is Chapter 12. Chapter 12 is on procurement management or contracting. So, as always, we're going to start with page 465 and let's go through the learning objectives. So, we're supposed to understand the importance of procurement management, describe the work that's involved in planning for this, and including the statement of work and the contract type and all sorts of interesting things. Discuss how to conduct procurement and strategies for obtaining seller responses, selecting, the most appropriate one, and how to award contracts, and the process for controlling procurement relationships and closing out, and then the software. So it kind of follows the way it always does. Okay, so opening case on page 466. Somebody was looking at the cost, and they had very, very high-paid consultants at this organization, and they had high turnover in the consultants, workforce, and they were basically paying what's called a time and materials contract, which basically says, it's like billable hours. If they spent 8 hours working on something for you, they charge you for 8 hours against a fixed billing rate. And there were no minimum qualifications in there, and there's no penalties for slipping, time, money, or quality, the triple constraint. And so the contractor had no incentive whatsoever of getting things done on time, and in fact, it would be a disincentive. Time and materials, if he was to hurry up and finish the project in 20 hours, he gets paid for 20 hours. If he was to take it slow and do it in 40 hours, he gets paid for 40 hours. So the type of contract really, really matters, doesn't it? Okay, so the opening case is all about, we're spending an awful lot of time on these outside consultants. Maybe there's something else we can do a little better. Okay, so to continue on page 466, they talk about the importance. Well, I basically told you what the importance was right off the bat. So, the definition of procurement, acquiring goods and services from an outside source. Okay, now some people talk about this as purchasing, right? And they also use another term called outsourcing, but don't get that confused exactly yet. Yes, we are going to talk about the traditional outsourcing, but I don't make pencils, okay? So I order my pencils from a company who makes pencils, right? Right? Okay, so that's outsourcing, right? I don't make my paper. I don't make pencils. I buy those products from other people. That is traditional outsourcing. Not necessarily what you might be thinking, but okay. So purchasing goods and services from people from the outside. That's what procurement is all about. Cool. All right. So there's a bullet list on page 466 and continuing on page 467. And now we are talking about the media view, right? What the media talks about when they talk about outsourcing. And that is taking offshoring is what the most appropriate term. Talked about, yes, U.S. is transferring an awful lot of manufacturing type jobs offshore. That is absolutely true. And you could say that the labor cost is the big issue here. There are some other technical issues involved, but it's happening. The U.S. economy for the last 40 years has been slowly switching from manufacturing base to a service base. And so when you talk about trade deficits for goods and services, you have to also remember to include the services because we provide lots and lots of services. Okay, so India, China, and the Philippines are typically targets for offshoring, particularly in the IT world. I'm not talking about, manufacturing, lug nuts, but for manufacturing phones, as an example, in the IT world. Yeah, those are the places that go. And India is one of the best because, first of all, they speak the same language. That's kind of handy. China and the Philippines, okay. Latin America is kind of coming up slowly as being a viable choice for people doing offshoring. And one of the things that's kind of weird is when you ask, why did you ship this product manufacturing offshore? They don't say, well, because they were so dang much cheaper. Now, that may be true, but that's not what they say. What they say is, we can't find qualified workers. We can't find the people with the right skills. And you might say, that's all bullshit. Well, maybe. Okay? I am very familiar with a story that happened, 30 years ago, when Dell was trying to come up with, they wanted to hire a bunch of people to do basically the quality assurance stuff, okay? And it required a little bit of statistics, like random sampling and percentages and things of that nature. And so they started hiring these high school students, recent graduates, to become their quality assurance people, and realized that they didn't understand statistics at all. And so Michael Dell even went to this Austin school board and said, "What the heck? I mean, you guys are not producing people that I can hire." And they went, "Really?" And so a gang of us, me included, got together and we did sort of like remedial math classes to prospective employees and current employees. Isn't that kind of crazy? Because we didn't have the right kind of people coming out of schools. Okay, so that had nothing to do with lower prices. It had to do with, geez, these people don't understand math. Okay, that's just one example. All right, so no one says that the main reason for offshoring is for cheaper labor. It may be the case, but they don't say that. What they say is, well, I don't have the right qualified people. So how much of that is true? I don't know. I might have to just leave that up to your imagination. You can do some research, and I'm guessing that 50% of the time it's true. It's not, it's not based on money. It's based upon, expertise. I don't know. I made that up. I don't know what that number is. 50% sounds about right. Okay, so the opposite of offshoring is called urban onshoring. Isn't that a crazy term? In our world, we called it in-house and out-house. Okay, that's kind of funny, but in-house meant we did it ourselves, and out-house we did it someplace else. Okay, that's what we called it. But if you had previously offshored something, and you were now changing your mind and bringing it back, which a lot of companies are doing, then urban onshoring is the way to go. You pick some urban area, that's kind of sort of economically blighted, where there's a ready pool of people who would be excellent workers for you, and that's how you do urban onshoring. Okay, so let's talk about the other reasons for doing offshoring. Okay, I'm sorry, I didn't mean that, offshoring. Let me start over. Let's talk about the traditional use of the term of, procuring and buying and doing those things from an outside source. For example, I do not manufacture my own paper. I don't manufacture my own staples or my pencils or the paper clips, right? No one does that. So we hire all that stuff done. That's just kind of normal, right? Okay. So outsourcing is done basically for two reasons. One is that you don't want to do that job. If you're in the boot repair business, okay, I don't want to have to learn HTML to be able to operate a web page. I really don't want to do that. I'm the boot repair shop. It's a mom and pop shop. It's been handed down through generations, and I'm just going to grab one of my cousin Guido. Well, yeah, okay, cousin Guido over there. Hey, you're going to be the webmaster, and you need to go to school and learn his stuff. Is that how it's supposed to work? Why not just take that someplace else? Why not just go out and outsource that piece? Makes sense, right? Okay, cool. Now, there's a cool story in here. One of the companies that was talking about, they did, honest to God, real offshoring and reduce the cost, of whatever that service was, and then use that money to turn right around and hire more people in the U.S. for different jobs. So basically, what they were saying, it was a trade-off. I have this job over here and this job over here. I don't have enough money to expand this. I really need to expand this over here, but I don't have enough money. So they offshore this piece, which saved them some money. At least they admitted it, right? Then took that money to expand this other service over here with in-house. So in theory, you could argue that I outsourced in order to save money so I can hire more people for these other jobs, hopefully better jobs. Because if it was just a one-for-one swap, that kind of wouldn't make much sense, would it? Okay, so there's a couple of things that are kind of different in procurement when it comes to software. So let's just talk now. I'm kind of done talking about offshoring and outsourcing. All right, so commercial software basically has a shelf life, right? I mean, how many people are running software that's 10 years old? Not me. I don't think I have anything in my system that's more than 10 years old, right? Okay. So software needs to have a lifespan, and it basically has to be economically viable during that period of time. So, for example, okay, let me give you another example. It's kind of crazy. Let's say you're an author of books, and you're selling, whatever, romance novels, okay? And those will stay on the shelf for years, right? They could be 20 years old and people still buy murder mysteries, right? It doesn't matter how old your book goes to paperback, and it stays in the bookstore as long as it takes for the sales to basically peter out. But let's say, for example, that I just wrote a book on how to install Windows 8.1. Well, how long did Windows 8.1 last? What? Well, it's like 18 months? Well, who the heck is going to buy that book now? So authors hate tech books. That's why tech books cost more than romance novels, because the period of time that this viable product is incredibly short. In other words, I can't amortize my cost over 15 years. I can only amortize it over 2 or 3. So the cost of software projects is kind of artificially constrained by its lifespan. Okay, so grow your own is often a viable option, because I'll just make it myself and I'll just continue to tweak this thing, and I don't have to worry about life cycle, cost in the long run. I don't have to worry about paying for something and then 5 years later having to do it again, and 5 years later having to do it again over and over and over. I'll just do it myself, and I'll just continuously modify this thing as I go along. Cool? Good answer. All right. So let's talk about the reasons for outsourcing, although I basically covered a lot of them. All right, first one is to access skills and technologies that your current staff don't have. Okay. And I'll go back to boot repair. Okay, you're a boot repair business, and you need a web page. Just outsource it, okay? How about another scenario that kind of is near and dear to my heart? Let's say, for example, you operate a website, and there's a phone tech support. Okay? So you're a worldwide company, and somebody calls up and they're speaking on the phone. You answer the phone, Kumquat Industries, help desk, how can I help you? And they're speaking a language that you don't understand. So what? Am I going to take all of my employees and say, okay, now you need to learn Spanish, and you need to learn Russian, and you need to learn French, and have these guys go to school and learn new languages? Is that how this works? Or do I outsource my help desk, which already hires people that are multilingual, right? It just kind of makes sense, right? Okay, cool. And of course, another classic example is, so this new piece of software that we're getting ready to install is going to require, some Java programming. Who here knows Java? And no one raises their hand. You go, dang it. Well, A, I could send somebody off to learn Java, or B, I'll outsource the thing. Okay, cool. All right. So you can another option could be, or reason rather, it could reduce both fixed and recurrent cost. It could be, for example, that the economies of scale. Let's go back to the language guy. If I was to hire somebody who spoke French for my tech support, basically he's going to be sitting there in his chair waiting for somebody to call up in French. And if no one calls up in French that day, I'm paying him to sit there and warm a seat. But if there's economies of scale, I go to a third party, and he's a help desk employee for like 5 companies or 100 companies. So all the French calls go to him, and then he, can do his thing. See the economies of scale? If you group things together, that guy is being more efficient than it was just one of him waiting for somebody to call in Russian or French or German or whatever thing. Okay. Oh, heck, this is a good place to stop for the 15-minute mark. We'll pick up this discussion again in just a few.